REL Appalachia is happy to be hosting this chat today. We've brought together experts in the field to share strategies and ideas for engaging with students as they transition from high school to post-secondary education and career training. We're glad that you could join us today. So let's meet our team. My name's Ashley, and I'm a researcher with REL Appalachia. I support teams in Kentucky that are working to improve post-secondary transitions. With us today is Jill Marcus. She's a researcher with our team and has helped host many workshops and webinars. Stephanie Suarez is also with us today. She's helped plan this webinar and is a name you may be familiar with as she coordinates all of our communications and makes sure that you get the resources you need following this webinar. We want to learn about you. So one more time, if you have not entered your name, location, and role, enter that in the chat. If you happen to be working in a very interesting workspace, given all of the remote work we're doing these days, feel free to share that. We also have a quick poll here. We'd like you to tell us what you're working on this week. So you can see the poll. Please select an option or multiple options to tell us what you're working on this week because we know your job shifts. Financial aid is a big one. Lots of folks are working in financial aid and helping students make decisions about where to enroll. And I imagine some of those decisions are changing. Answering questions from students is a big one, and I'm sure there are a variety of questions being asked. And planning for fall enrollment. So I suspect that many of these are interrelated topics, of helping students with financial aid, answering their questions, and helping them figure out their fall plans. Okay. Thank you for responding. That helps us make sure we tailor the information we share to address your concerns and interests. Okay, so norms for today. To start off, we want to review today's norms for the virtual chat. This is not a sit and listen webinar. Many of you submitted good questions ahead of today's webinar, and we're prepared to answer those. And we'd love for you to submit more questions live as we're talking. You can submit them in the chat below. You can also send them directly to the presenters if you don't want to submit them to the general chat. We'll be tracking those, and we'll be organizing them by topic so that we can answer as many as possible in the second half of this webinar. At the very end, we're going to ask for feedback, so please don't leave without giving us feedback on your participation today. Our goal for today, our goals are twofold. First, we want to share strategies and talk about some of the challenges everyone's facing. But more importantly, we want to offer a forum where practitioners, you all, can ask questions from experts in the field and get answers immediately. So I'm going to go quickly through all of this introductory information. We'll reserve a half an hour for our presenters to share the strategies they're working on, and the remainder of the time will be for you all. So what is your greatest interest today? Our panel can speak to lots of topics. We want to answer questions in the order of greatest need and priority. We have this loose framework for guiding our Q&A time. Tell us which topics are of most interest to you today. Select up to 3. Okay, I see responses coming in. Thank you. It looks like we have a lot of interest in how to reach families virtually, as well as supporting first-generation low-income or underrepresented students, preparing for the fall. Okay. These are great. I'm going to let you continue filling that out for just a second more as I move on. So why are we meeting today and having a special COVID-19 chat around post-secondary transitions? We know that not all students who are admitted show up in the fall, but what is the proportion? There's a range. Between 10% and 40% of accepted students do not show up to campus in the fall. That's anywhere from 1 to 4 students out of every 10 in a typical year. We work to prevent losing students because of financial hardships, fear of leaving home, or making the decision to jump straight into the workforce. What do we think might happen during this year's unique circumstances? The same normal challenges exist, but they're now compounded. And there's the added challenge of remote learning and courses. So what might next fall look like? We've made up these data, obviously, but what could happen? Could we lose even more students over the summer? We'll turn now to Jill Marcus. She'll introduce today's panelists who are here to share what they've been working on to help improve student transitions to post-secondary pathways.
Thank you, Ashley, and hello, everyone. It's great to see people from so many diverse locations joining us today. In a moment, I'll introduce our panelists, and they'll speak to the burning issues of the current situation. And then after that, we're going to have some time for a Q&A session. So please, as we're going along, as questions occur to you, include them in the chat. And also, if you have your own expertise and experience, if you have good ideas or things that are working for you, if you would share those in the chat as well so that people can learn from each other. After today's webinar, we'll be creating a blog, and we're going to pull from the information from this chat and from this presentation to write that blog. So don't worry about taking super careful notes today. You'll get a follow-up blog, and it will be used to answer any questions that we don't have a chance to get to during the Q&A session today. You'll all get that link sent to you by our friend Stephanie. Sorry. So our presenters today were chosen because they have expertise and practical experience in supporting post-secondary transition, and they've adapted that for the current crisis situation. So they'll be talking to you about the FAFSA, the completion of it and the challenges with that, about completing enrollment paperwork, about emotional supports, and about effective practices for communication and engagement. We'll begin with the presenters from the National College Attainment Network. Morley Keller is the Director of Technical Assistance at NCAN, and she provides professional development to direct service providers and managers to help ensure the success and sustainability of college access programs. She consults on governance issues, programming, data collection, research and best practices, and also develops comprehensive training materials. Bill DeBon is NCAN's Director of Data and Evaluation. He leads NCAN's benchmarking project, which examines enrollment and completion outcomes of students served by college access and success programs. Bill also oversees NCAN's Data and Evaluation Toolkit and the Form Your Future FAFSA tracker. They will share some data about what's going on with FAFSA applications now. So, and they'll discuss all of the issues and challenges that need our attention. So, Morley, to you.
Actually, Bill's going to begin. So, Bill, I'm going to let you get started.
Great. Thank you so much, and thanks for that introduction. Thank you so much to REL Appalachia for the opportunity to speak with you today. Thank you all for being here and for your interest in how you can help students navigate this really difficult time. If you're not familiar with the National College Attainment Network, it's nice to meet you here virtually. Just a quick thumbnail sketch of who we are and what we do. We're a Washington, D.C. based organization with a membership of nearly 500 programs across the country. We're celebrating our 25th anniversary this year, and our members are a diverse mix of community-based organizations, K-12 districts and schools, colleges and universities, foundations, Gear Up and TRIO programs, state agencies, and more. But across that diverse mix of stakeholders, our members are united by their commitment to closing post-secondary equity gaps on the basis of income, race, ethnicity, and first-generation status. And given the challenges that COVID-19 presents, that mission has never been more important for students. You can see NCAN's vision, mission, and strategies on your screen now. And at NCAN, we do our work through providing technical assistance to our members and the education field more broadly, advocating at the federal and state levels for policy changes to reduce obstacles for students to access and complete college. And we engage in projects that find new strategies for helping students and education stakeholders alike. Our work and the work our members engage in is really critical because talent is everywhere, but opportunity is not. This chart shows college enrollment rates for high school graduates from the class of 2018 by different high school categories. And you can see here that high schools with significant proportions of either students from low-income backgrounds or students of color enrolled in college less frequently than students from high schools where this wasn't the case. And we see similar gaps in post-secondary completion by high school as well. NCAN members work to close those gaps and help students navigate the college-going process. And even in a normal year for underrepresented student groups, that process involves jumping over a lot of obstacles, and this year certainly that is exacerbated. We're here to talk about FAFSA data issues and challenges here with you today, and focusing on FAFSA completion is one of the 5 key actions that we think districts, schools, and everyone in their orbit should be doing right now to help students stay on a path to post-secondary education. So the FAFSA is the gateway to accessing both federal and state financial aid, and it's often a requirement to unlock institutional aid as well. There's a strong association between completion of the FAFSA by a senior and their immediate post-secondary enrollment, and that association strengthens for students from low-income backgrounds. Unfortunately, our work at NCAN shows that in far too many states, students from districts with higher levels of poverty are actually less likely to complete the FAFSA, even though they stand to gain more from doing so than their more well-off peers. We also know that students from low-income backgrounds often file later in the FAFSA cycle, which means that the timing of COVID-19 is particularly unfortunate. Let me advance the slide here. Here we go. So there's another really good reason we are encouraging a focus on FAFSA completion, and you can see it in this chart. So this chart shows both the percent change in total FAFSA completions from last year to this year for high school seniors, that's in the light blue, and that's in the light blue. I'm sorry, my chart title here has it reversed. The light blue here is for high school seniors, and the dark blue is for renewing applicants. And you can see that from January to mid-March, these cycles were more or less holding steady with last year, although renewals were down a little bit. But once we get to mid-March, around March 16th is when a lot of states started moving to virtual learning. We can see that after that date, there's a precipitous decline in the percent change year over year in FAFSA completions, both for first applicants and for renewing applicants. So we're talking about, for first-time applicants, having tens of thousands fewer seniors having completed the FAFSA at this point in the cycle than last year, about 61,000 fewer seniors right now. And when we're talking about FAFSA renewals, we're talking about in the hundreds of thousands. Compounding the issue here for high school seniors and FAFSA completion, so the yellow line here is FAFSA completion year over year for Title I eligible public high schools, and then the blue line is for non-Title I eligible public high schools. And we can see that the FAFSA completion deficit for Title I eligible high schools is much larger than that of the deficit for non-Title I eligible high schools. So what does that mean? It means that public high schools with large concentrations of students from low-income backgrounds are falling even further behind than last cycle in terms of FAFSA completion than students from more well-off communities. And Title I eligible public high schools are falling both faster and harder in terms of FAFSA completion than their peers. And this raises a really significant equity issue. Last year, about 62% of the class of 2019 completed a FAFSA by the end of August or so. And at current filing rates, a smaller percentage of the class of 2020 is going to complete a FAFSA than did last year. We still need about 400,000 seniors across the country to complete the FAFSA to get to last year's completion rate. And a lot of those students are going to need help to complete the FAFSA. They need assistance, and that's both technical assistance and moral assistance, moral support. Because many of these students will come, again, like I said, from low-income backgrounds. They'll be students of color. They may be first-generation students. And even in a normal year, those students tend to need more support to hurdle the obstacles to get to college. And so it is going to take a concerted effort from a lot of partners in a lot of communities all across the country to keep the class of 2020 on track for post-secondary pathway. One other slide I want to show you here, so this is FAFSA completion data by the geography of public high schools since March 13th. And we can see that FAFSA completions have declined the most nationally in small towns and rural communities compared to last academic year. And there's a lot of different reasons for that. There may be fewer community partners available to provide assistance, but there's also infrastructural issues where students may not have access to broadband. They may be getting broadband from the school, typically, to fill out the FAFSA, and they may not have access to it right now. So this is just something to keep in mind, that FAFSA completion and deficits in FAFSA completion are not hitting all communities equally, and we really do need to step in to make sure that students get the assistance they need. So at this point, I'm going to pass it over to my colleague, Morley Keller, our Director of Technical Assistance, and she is going to provide some insight into what stakeholders and community partners should be doing to assist students during this difficult time. Thanks for your attention. I look forward to your questions.
Great. Thank you very much, Bill. Good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure to be with you. What we wanted to do is kind of talk quickly about some of the issues and challenges that students and families may be facing right now. You know, one of the things that we know about families who need assistance in completing a FAFSA is that individual support is often the most effective method. And so, you know, I know school counselors and members from our college access programs around the country are trying desperately to help those students and families who have not yet filed their FAFSA, and individual support is happening obviously in a virtual method right now. But as you can imagine, one of the issues that we're running into is broadband access. You know, in a lot of the rural areas, it's difficult whether the family has the device or even access to the internet. If they have a device, can be a challenge. So it is proving difficult to get families the one-on-one or assistance or support that they need. One of the other issues, we oftentimes are in a situation where not everybody can get an FSA ID, which is the username and password that you need to sign the FAFSA. And so printing a signature page, so even if you are out in rural area and you have access, but if you don't have a printer at home, it can be difficult to get that signature page printed and signed and mailed in so that the FAFSA can be processed once it's arrived. You know, hopefully we can find different kinds of supports, or students can find different kinds of supports for their assistance through their school counselor or access advisors, financial aid offices taking phone calls to help students, and there are several online platforms, chat bots, websites, YouTube videos, all etc. that can help students and families complete their FAFSA. We have put together on our NCAN website a resource page that is related to the pandemic and different types of resources that, you know, students and families can use. That web page is open to the public and open for any of you to jump on there and utilize the site. Just to let folks know, I just lost video. So Bill, if you can finish off.
Oh, sorry, I'm there on mute. So there will be some challenges this summer, as there always are, with FAFSA verification. Students selected for verification have to submit additional paperwork to you know, provide evidence of financial information, usually related to family size or income, and IRS tax transcripts are only available through an online process, and printing out you know, the transcripts, sending them in can be kind of an onerous process. So NCAN at ncan.org, we have some advice for community partners, schools and districts who are going through the verification process, so we encourage you to check those out.
Bill, I'm back if you...
Okay, sure. Go ahead, Maureen.
Okay, all right, thanks. Sorry about the technical difficulty there. You know, one of the things that, as Bill was describing, lots of issues with students who file a FAFSA and then get selected for verification. The website to secure tax transcripts. You can only, they're not accepting paper copies and can only download, and many of our folks do not have the opportunity. Bill, I'm going to let you finish off because the video's gone again.
Sorry, I'm back on mute. The other thing to definitely keep in mind is that students will need help interpreting financial aid award letters, especially where they've been accepted to multiple institutions. You know, award letters are not written in a universal kind of language. They can look different. Explaining the difference between different kinds of grants and loans and what students will and won't have to pay back is something that students and families may not be familiar with, and so. And can remember, U.S. Buyer has some really good information here on interpreting award letters and, you know, helping students understand, okay, what am I actually going to have to pay? What is my net price? That's really important insight for students to have as they're deciding where to go. The other, speaking of net price, the last bullet here is understanding what are families actually going to have to write a check for a given semester versus what is the sticker price on the college's website for what the all-in cost is. We know that for low-income students, that price is often much lower because of the financial aid available to them. A couple more things here. A lot of institutions are pushing back commitment dates from the traditional date of May 1st, and NACAC actually is compiling a really good list of modified dates. And so students should, be aware that they may have more time to make a decision than they thought they did on May 1st. All of those deadlines are getting pushed back. Not all, many deadlines are getting pushed back because there's a lot of uncertainty about, what is the college experience going to look like this fall? Is it going to be virtual? Is it going to be in person? Is it going to be a hybrid? That varies widely right now from campus to campus. And it's not just what the experience is going to be like on campus. We also know that household experiences are changing a lot right now because of all the economic uncertainty. What may have seemed like a good economic position a few months ago may be completely topsy-turvy now, and so that may change the calculus for a lot of different students. So one last thing I need to wrap up here. Definitely investigate at the institution what the financial aid appeals process is going to be if students and families need to change their financial aid information on record. And, that appeal process is something that certainly having a college access advisor or college success advisor to help a student or family walk through that process could be really valuable for students.
Okay, thank you, Morley and Bill, for clearly describing the host of issues that we all need to keep in mind as we're working with these various populations to help them successfully move on to post-secondary transition. Our next speaker is Sarah Woodruff of College Transition Collaborative, CTC, which brings together pioneering social psychologists, education researchers, and higher education practitioners to create learning environments that produce more equitable higher education outcomes. Sarah is a thought partner in the development of the CTC research agenda and organization strategy to maximize impact on institutions and the students they serve. She's going to be sharing strategies for reducing summer melt and for providing social emotional support these days. So Sarah, over to you. Sarah, you're on mute.
Oh, thank you so much. I'm sorry about that. Thank you so much for the introduction, Ashley. As she just stated, the core work of the College Transition Collaborative is to really transform higher education environments by focusing on equity. And I think the thing that really stands out about our work is that, there's a lot of focus on the actual instruction in institutions, but I think there's less of an attention to what I like to call a standard of care in higher education, where we think about what are the experiences that students have, particularly for those who are students of color, first-generation students, and then students who are in male-dominated fields, and thinking about really how those experiences translate to inequitable outcomes in higher education. So what we do is bring together research that is informed by practitioners and ground that research and apply it in a way that practitioners are better positioned to support students. And in thinking about how we take those insights and scale them so a greater number of institutions can have access to those solutions and really do the work that is going to shape the student experience in a way to close some of those equity gaps that are so pervasive. So thinking about Summer Mel, all the strategies I'm going to discuss really are connected around that theme of care. And so while they're broken up into 3 topics, I think they're not at all distinct, because basically what we're looking at is sort of the softer side of the experience. It's not just the numbers, enrollment dates, outcomes, but how do we actually leverage improvements in outcomes by thinking about who students are as people, the experiences they have, and the ways in which their group membership, particularly around first-gen status, low-income students of color, the ways in which they experience those things differently, and those things contribute to inequity in higher education. So one of the topics that I think NCAN just really illustrated so importantly is what we like to call bureaucratic hassles in higher education. And these are some of the everyday tasks that come up and once you're in college or even in preparation to college that particularly can signal to students who are from those groups we mentioned that they don't belong, that they're not going to be successful. And so they interpret those challenges and signals in very different ways than students who might be from higher resource families who are more accustomed to navigating those processes. So one of the things I think is really, really important during this time is thinking strategically about how to scaffold those bureaucratic hassles. And these things can include FAFSA paperwork, eventually down the line course selection, financial aid requests, like if someone is a follow-up to say we need this information from you, even enrollment paperwork and managing deadlines. So I think the extent for practitioners, administrators, whoever is supporting students as they prepare for college, and probably in the early days of college, is thinking about ways in which to ensure that students feel like they have the tools to navigate these processes, because the students who are most vulnerable are most likely to say, hey, you know what, this is an indication that I don't belong in college, maybe I shouldn't do that. So the extent to which we're able to help ease some of those concerns and stresses will be really important to ensuring that those students who are admitted actually show up to college, which is obviously a priority for us. Additionally, there's so much going on right now. I think it's really important that students feel seen by administrators, by their classmates, even the institutions where they've applied. And so the extent to which you are able to reach out to students, provide personal contact, even if it's an email that looks personal that you're sending to everyone, I think that's really important. And this can also take place at the institutional level that they're applying. And so I'm hoping that what we see from colleges is that you see alumni reaching out, current students reaching out, and even if you're able, if the school isn't doing this themselves, if you're able to reach out to an alumni office or to admissions to connect them with a student who is already a matriculant, who's attending, or an alumni, I think this will be really critical because, in the mess of all of this where students aren't seeing each other face-to-face, they aren't seeing counselors or other support systems on a regular basis, the extent to which they know someone sees them, someone is concerned about their well-being, someone is concerned about their matriculation into an institution will be really, really critical to ensure that those students don't fall through the cracks and that they actually show up where they've been admitted in the fall. And last but not least, I think around summer melt, and this really connects to all of this, is really seeing students beyond did they complete the FAFSA, did they do this task or that task, but looking at their social emotional concerns, because I think now more than ever students are going to question a lot of things because some of the hopes they've had may have been doused, not being able to graduate, not having those social personal relationships in the way they've used to. So I think it's really, really important that students feel affirmed, that they see these concerns and challenges as normal, and that you impress upon them a growth mindset, the belief that the concerns they have can be overcome and that they can develop the tools to get through them. And one of the ways I would recommend that, and I'm going to talk about this on my last slide, is completing an online belonging intervention, which is created by my colleagues at the College Transition Collaborative. And also as a shameless plug, two of our founders, David Yeager and Mary Murphy, along with Carol Dweck, who is really the pioneer of growth mindset, actually gave the keynote at South by Southwest EDU last week. And so if you want to access it online, it really connects the ways in which faculty mindsets connect to student outcomes. And I think even for instructors, administrators, whoever they are, I think it's really important to think about the ways in which we communicate what is possible to students, what they're capable of learning, regardless of where they're starting. So I'm going to go through this very briefly, but we work with higher education institutions to really support equity, belonging, and growth. And so working with institutions directly right now, we had to respond very quickly to provide some COVID-19 resources for them to be able to respond to the challenges they're facing in the classroom as they switch from face-to-face instruction to online, as well as just even with the emotional supports for students. So some of the things that you can find in this guide, which are listed on our website as well, are some steps to really go through and give that emotional support. The first is just actually checking in, letting them know you see them, asking what their concerns are, and also seeing them as a whole person. You know, I think we can get very concerned with the metrics, you know, checking off boxes, what are you doing, but making sure that they understand that they are a whole being and the challenges they're facing, you know, go beyond just, did I turn this form in, but that they may have economic concerns about their families, all kinds of things. They may have family members who've been affected by COVID. So making sure that we see them as an entire person. And additionally, affirming that these emotions and fears are normal, so they don't feel like there's something wrong with them for going through these experiences. And then also, you know, as even was presented by NCAN, updating them on resources. The situation is so volatile and ever-changing, is that they continue to get information about what is happening on ways they can be supported. And again, encouraging social connection virtually, and whether this is jumping on a Zoom call with their classmates and just like talking about some of their concerns, or even facilitating group text messages or things that will just let them feel like even though they're at home that they're not alone. You know, we say it's physical distancing, not social distancing. And assure them also that more information is coming. I think even at the higher education level, one of the challenges is there's so many questions, so many things are in flux. So letting them know that there are people who are actively thinking about these topics as we are facing the same challenges. I work at Stanford. We're basically out of Stanford University, so some of the concerns, we're supporting institutions, but still facing a lot of question marks ourselves. I won't go through this in too much depth, but also we created a communication guide, and this one was based on guidance that was produced by a medical organization to really give you a step-by-step of if a person asks this question, what's a possible response. So I encourage you to download this on our website, because it really gives them, I think, ways to talk to students about the questions that are inevitably coming up, and just, again, normalizing the experience and conveying compassion and understanding for the challenges students are facing, and reminding them that these are unusual circumstances. Of course, no matter how expert, how mature you are, I think students can think that adults have all the answers, and I think now more than ever, we're all negotiating the fact that we're vulnerable. We don't have responses to all their questions in a perfect form, but just really being empathetic about those challenges, and acknowledging the fact that it's in flux and that you'll do everything you can to support them, and they should also be attentive to the ways in which things are changing, and also connecting them to other places to get information as the situation unfolds, because I do know that higher education institutions are really making some critical choices so that the information that's available is likely to change in time. Last but not least, thinking about looking forward to fall, I think probably the work the College Transition Collaborative is most well known for is the social belonging intervention. And this intervention is something that I consider to be very high impact and low effort. It is essentially an online intervention that takes about 30 minutes. And the goal of this intervention is to really normalize the adversities that students face when they're entering college, particularly those students who are, again, low-income, first-generation students of color, those who are least likely to have exposure to higher education context, and frequently those contexts are least inclusive of them and least designed for their success. So essentially this intervention is really just a set of exercises where they read stories from older students who've been in their place to help them understand some of the challenges that are faced in colleges and the ways in which they can adapt and adjust to be successful. So essentially the process is, like, for an example, if the student believes that the experience is not typical, one of the things they may think is people like me don't belong here and are not welcome here. And what the intervention tries to help them do is change the response psychologically to being, this is a normal part of being in school. And another example is withdrawal from the academic environment and learning process at hand. And what we hope is that the intervention transforms to sustained involvement with academic environment and learning processes at hand. And last, an example is diminished academic engagement and performance. And the intervention helps students to increase academic performance and engagement. And again, this intervention to me is particularly transformative because it really does, it benefits all students, but it mostly closes equity gaps with the students who are most concerned about not matriculating into college and not being successful while they're there. And just some data points on this intervention, and what's really important is that that it's available online through the College Transition Collaborative website, and you can link to it. It is free of charge. I think each year about 350 schools can enroll, and we've extended the actual enrollment period, understanding that higher education institutions are going to be extending maybe their start dates. And also, this works really well for some high schools to enroll to support their students that are going to college. Just some key data points around what this intervention does is in an urban charter school, students who completed this intervention were 13%. There was an increase in 13% of first-year enrollment for students who actually ended up going to college. So it essentially eliminated 13% of summer melt. Additionally, it increased enrollment by 4% of students at a public institution, and it increases first-year GPA by almost 1/10 of a percentage point, and it closes achievement gaps between low-income first-gen students, students of color, by anywhere between 30 and 40% in terms of graduation rates. So I think this is really a transformative intervention because it does not take a lot of time, a lot of effort, but what it does is really help the students who are least likely to feel like they can be successful in college to develop a mindset that allows them to navigate the challenges they experience. And again, I think it takes so little time but can really be transformative, even in terms of health outcomes. So this intervention has reached over 130,000 students nationally, and again, it is free of charge to schools, it is very low effort, and it really can be transformative. So I encourage you to, as high schools, counselors, to actually enroll your students, your school in the intervention so they can have the support as they prepare to go to college, and also increases the probability that they actually do so. And again, as I mentioned, all the things I've discussed today, the resources are available for free and downloadable on the collegetransitioncollaborative.org site. And also there, if you look at our work, you will see the social belonging intervention in which you can enroll your students and get more information about how it works and the process. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you, Sarah, for pointing us to those helpful resources and underlining the importance of the personal connection and how to maintain that. Our last set of presenters are from the Virginia College Advising Corps. Joy Pugh is Director of Virginia College Advising Corps, which is a statewide college access program that increases the number of low-income, first-generation, and underrepresented high school students that enter and complete higher education. It's the founding chapter of the National College Advising Corps, now with over 600 college advisors serving across 15 states. We'll also hear from Hayden Parrish, who is a 2018 UVA Sociology and African American Studies graduate, who is a second-year advisor at Susanna County High School. And they're going to share what they've learned about communicating with families during the pandemic and key things they've learned about virtual advising. Over to you.
Great. Thank you so much, Jill. As Jill said, our program is based at the University of Virginia. We are the founding chapter of College Advising Corps and also an AmeriCorps program, so that's why we get to use all these fun logos all the time. I'm also currently serving as president of Virginia CAN, which is our Virginia College Access Network group, which is a statewide board working all across Virginia. So just very quickly about the Virginia College Advising Corps, as Jill mentioned, our target student demographic is low-income, underrepresented, and first-generation students, as I know is the target for many folks on this call who work in college access. We have a near-peer advising model, so our college advisors are recent college graduates themselves, and they serve a 2-year term, and that's directly in the high school site. So we serve in high school sites all across Virginia. They serve full-time, so we're not a cohort model. We serve the whole school, starting with the senior class and then working backwards from there, depending on the time of year and the number of students that an advisor is serving. And speaking of, our caseloads range quite a bit, so we're in small rural schools and also larger urban districts. And so our caseload can run from roughly 40 to 700 seniors, but we have an average of around 230 seniors. So right now across Virginia, we're serving over 9,000 seniors this year with 41 advisors in service. As I said, all geographic regions and rural and urban districts, and advisors assist with that whole list of things. So they're really a one-stop shop, again, full-time in the high school to assist students with all the steps necessary for post-secondary matriculation. And by post-secondary, I do mean broad, 2-year, 4-year, technical and trade schools, all of those options. Quickly, a map, just to give you a sense again of the locations we are across Virginia. The colors don't mean anything, but just to show you our broad reach from south side, southwest, over to the eastern shore, central Virginia, and one in northern Virginia. going to turn it over to Hayden for a couple slides, and then I'll be back with you.
Hi, everyone. So what I found during COVID-19 is that virtual communication with students and families is largely still the same as before the pandemic, but we now have the responsibility and the time to adjust our methods. I know there have been a few questions about reaching students without internet access. Most of these methods do require internet access, but there are a few sprinkled in that do not. So I will start with texting with students. Texting one-on-one with students usually has a great response rate. They're usually really quick to respond, but it's not right for every situation. If you're not comfortable texting students, then it's not worth it. And if the student feels uncomfortable, then it's often inappropriate. But there's plenty of other ways to go about doing it. I've had great success pre and post-pandemic with Remind. For those of you who aren't familiar with Remind, it's an app and an online tool that allows you to send professional one-way text messages to groups of students for announcements, and you can prevent them from replying. So for me, that avoids any privacy conflicts that might arise if you're in like a group text with students, because they can't respond with anything. It's just a one-way announcement. In my eyes, email is certainly the most equitable form of communication. In my district, every student has a school email account, and of course emails never expire, so if they don't have internet access right away, that message is still waiting for them in their inbox when they do have internet access. There's no algorithm that could bury an announcement like often happens on social media. So it's always there for the students to refer back to. However, if your students are anything like mine, they rarely check their email before the pandemic, and even less so now. So we must be creative with messaging that'll point students towards the more detailed information in their inboxes. Some of my colleagues have used newsletters to communicate with students. I know a few have used MailChimp because they have great free templates online. I've personally found great success with putting announcements in my town's newspaper. We're a pretty small rural town, so parents and family members typically check the newspaper pretty often. And I know a lot of other advisors are mailing home announcements and other messaging, so that kind of circumvents any internet access issues. And I'll change the slide. So this is one of my students who celebrated Virtual Decision Day. She was very proud of that shirt, and I'll circle back around to Virtual Decision Day. But probably the week after Virginia implemented stay-at-home orders, I started an Instagram account for my office. I'd been hesitant to utilize social media before because I hadn't felt like I had the time to make creative content and to be consistent with it. But COVID-19 gave me plenty of time to create engaging content. Good social media for students is creative and consistent. Students will very quickly unfollow any dormant accounts, so we need to make sure they're active with good, exciting information. Facebook is great for parents and for faculty. A lot of my teachers get information from our Facebook page, but Instagram is more ideal for students. And Instagram is also really helpful for connecting with college representatives as well as military recruiters. I get a lot of information through Instagram now. Some of my colleagues have even embraced TikTok, but I don't think I'm creative enough for that, so I've not ventured down that direction. But I've used my new Instagram account for daily scholarship spotlight, something that I wasn't doing before but now have the time to do, is highlight each scholarship on our Instagram account. I also advertise office hours. Some of my colleagues use Instagram Live for office hours. And I also used it to celebrate our virtual decision day. So instead of having, of course, a huge celebration in person with Decision Day, each student who participated got a Decision Day t-shirt that they picked up from the school and they were picking up homework, and then were able to decorate it and send it to me to post on our Instagram account. And finally, phone calls are likely more successful than ever because hopefully most people are staying at home during this time. keep in mind that many of our students and families are essential workers, so business hours may not always be the best time to call home if you are calling individually to different households. If your district allows you to use robocalls, this may be the most effective communication. I found that our students and families are all eagerly anticipating updates about grades and graduation and other similar things. So I've been taking full advantage of their willingness to listen to announcements.
Thanks, Hayden. So a few key learnings that we have, and I should say, I know sort of at the beginning of the webinar, everybody was introduced as experts. We certainly don't feel like experts. We've been doing this virtual advising for just a couple months, so like many of you, we are adjusting and trying to make the best of it, having been used to an in-school model for the rest of the history of our program. But here's what we've learned so far. It's really key and important data collection and usage, and I mean that from really the most basic information to maybe more higher level information. So student emails and phone numbers, we know particularly with the students that we serve, phone numbers can change quite a bit with students and families. So just getting those accurate phone numbers, keeping those up to date, and having some kind of collection system where others in your school would be able to access that up-to-date phone number and email contact is huge. FAFSA completion tracker, so checking every week to see how your school is doing on FAFSA.gov and knowing that you need to reach out to students depending on how those percentages are going. And then also really, nitty-gritty post-secondary plans. Where are students thinking of going? Where were they saying that they were going before the pandemic, and where are they going now? And again, keeping track of that. And that can be, a system that your school already has, or it could just be an Excel sheet that school counselors or other college access professionals are using. But I think the timeliness of messages is really important. And so if you have in that tracker that students were considering four-year universities who have now changed their deadline to June 1st, then the college advisor or the school counselor, whoever it is, knows to reach out maybe a few days before that to check in with them. If they're going to a two-year school, maybe a different timeline. That gets into the next piece, which is specificity and personalization of messages. So the big, broad messages and outreach are not working right now. Notes about you should apply for scholarships, or go to college, or all these messages. You've really got to get down to the one-on-one with the student to understand their situation, their plan, and then personalize the message to them, whether it's in any of the formats that Hayden just talked about. I think this is an excellent time for creativity, and have been so impressed with what our advisors are doing. So, for example, some just did a recent call. So they had students, seniors interested in the nursing field. And so this is a time, as everything seems, virtual, and it's hard to wrap your hands around it, to make things tangible. So they made it tangible for these students by having a smaller online Zoom call, and they had graduates from their high schools that had gone into the nursing field. They had a teacher from a local community college who teaches in the nursing program, and the local four-year college who's also involved with the nursing program there. So you had all different levels of students who have gone into that field, who are now in the field, and also the teachers who are teaching that field to talk to a small group of students. And that just made it tangible for them. It made them believe even more that this is possible and that they can do this right now. That pair of advisors also did that for students interested in the education field, and I know our advisors are also doing this with admissions reps. So if you had students in your school who were going to a certain university and now are feeling like that's out of reach, having that admissions person come and talk directly to small groups of students has been really effective. Decision day is typically on or around May 1st. I think many of you know deadlines have moved to June 1st, so some of our advisors did online decision day, some are doing decision week, and some are doing decision month, so a great time. And some call this college signing day, National College Signing Day, of course, so one and the same. So we've got a picture there at the bottom where Hayden had teachers and administrators around the school wear their college gear or have a college sign just to get students excited about decision day. But a great time to, again, do these fun social media posts and increase your creativity there. And finally, we have advisors who have created YouTube channels, so for some asynchronous learning, right, because we know even if students do have internet, it might not be really strong, and they might not be able to keep up with a synchronous session. So this is Brianna, who is working on decoding financial aid award letters, as Bill talked about earlier. Really, really critical for students to make good decisions, just to understand what these letters are saying to them. And so she created some videos that students can watch on their own time. One also that I didn't add to my slide because I just heard yesterday, but responding when students respond. I think normally we really try to, protect work-life balance, and that's important. I will say in these times where there's not that option of just seeing a student in the hallway the next day, we do hear that if students if college advisors are responsive, on a Sunday afternoon or potentially on a weeknight at 9 p.m., and the student is engaging with them and texting with them, that it is important to respond at that time. Of course, you always want to protect your personal boundaries, and you want to make sure, that you're keeping yourself in good health. But if you are able to kind of structure your day and have that flexibility, it's really important to respond to students when they are ready to talk with you. And with that, I will pause and turn it back over to Jill.
Thank you, Joy and Hayden, and thank you all of our panelists for all of the important information and great tips and ideas that you've given us. And now we want to turn to questions from our participants today. And we want to refer back to the poll earlier that we did about the things that you said you were most interested in hearing more about. And the first one was about reaching families virtually. And we had lots of good ideas from our presenters today. And it'd be great if any of you have additional ideas about how you're reaching people in this, virtual only time, to add those in the chat so that we can capture those as well. The second important category that you're interested in was supporting first-generation, low-income, and underrepresented students. And a lot of the questions that came through the chat were about supports recommended for students with disabilities, and how are those supports different during COVID. So while our presenters think about answering that question, I'll just point out, so if you can think about these sentence starters that we put on the slide here for you, they're here to help you sort of organize your question in a way that'll be helpful to everybody that's on all 142 people that are on the call. So think about the sentence starters, write in your questions, and I'm hoping some of our presenters are willing to talk about what they know about the specifics of supporting students with disabilities these days. If no one speaks up, I'm going to call on you.
I would certainly say that I am no expert, this is Sarah from CTC, on supporting students with disabilities. But context, I spent 15 years in K-12, and a lot of my research was in students who are having difficulties or disabilities. But I would certainly say and I wrote this in the chat, reach out to those, work with families to reach out to universities where they've been admitted, their offices of disability or access. There's certainly people who are tasked with these jobs to really think about disabilities and making sure those accommodations are met. And there are many legal protections to ensure that's happening. So whether the student is reaching out directly or you're working together to do this, I would actually directly go to those offices, contact those institutions, and press them to be clear about what the student needs are and to figure out what the accommodation plan is. And if you're hitting a wall, there are so many advocacy organizations that are well, positioned to do this work. And if it means pressing them legally about their obligations, I would take those steps to ensure that students who have disabilities aren't falling through the cracks as we are facing this. And then also, ultimately, it's also going to need to be, probably when the student gets there, is thinking about working with instructors. So talking to that office to see if once they matriculate, who's going to be able, how do they advocate and support themselves, and making sure that, whether it's hybrid learning, online learning, or whatever, that the accommodations are in place so that that student can actually be successful and learn as they should.
Well, thank you, Sarah. Did any of our other presenters want to speak to this question about how you might support students with disabilities differently?
This is a little unrelated to that, but I had a student ask me yesterday so I always make sure that my students know about mental health resources on their campuses, as well as like things like writing centers and tutoring centers. And one of my students asked me yesterday, will those things still be available in the fall if classes are online? And of course I told them that it's going to vary from school to school. And this answer might be a little Pollyannish, but I told them that schools care a lot about the retention rates and their freshman retention rates, as well as the overall graduation rates. And so I'm hoping that these schools are going to be pushing things like writing centers and tutoring centers virtually to students, whether or not they're in person or online. That's my hope. That's what I'm telling my students. But I also told them that if they don't find that information easily, they're going to have to reach out and ask directly for that information.
Yeah, and I imagine that all of the questions that students normally have, they're asking them again now and are looking to you for answers. How is this going to be different now? So I think you're on target there to start preparing for making your best guess at how to advise students in just the normal topics. So Hayden gave some ideas about reaching families that don't have internet access. You talked about phone calls and you talked about texting. We're wondering if there are other ideas that either the presenters or even our participants have about reaching families that don't have internet access.
Yeah, this is Joy, and I put some of those in the chat. I mean, I think phone calls, particularly for younger folks, are dreaded, but they are important and they are working in a lot of cases right now. Again, just to have that time with students and families to talk through things. And I also think, I mean, again, we serve in rural areas where, yeah, internet access is really tricky, and we have encouraged students to, so many high schools have become hotspots, and I know VCCS, the community college system, is also offering, internet hotspots. So at some point, I think you do have to connect, even if you're getting out, staying safely in your car, and driving to an area that has that. We also looked at trying to get stories in local papers and TV stations. Unfortunately, a lot of that has become conglomerates just in the media landscape. But I think Hayden actually got a story about his decision day and online advising in the Fluvanna Review. So if you do have any local papers or any other sources of information that are relevant to your community, it's a great time to reach out and offer a story about what's going on with students right now and make sure that you get some key messages out there.
Okay, thank you, Joy. Hayden talked about making phone calls and emails for people that are in his school, so he has access to their phone numbers and email addresses. But for groups that aren't working with specific school systems, has anybody had luck finding a good resource for getting that level of contact information for students? Okay, we're getting tricky. No, that's when we're going to have to look into there. We have, they just try any email or address, and I know that people that I've worked with sometimes are able to ask one kid to have another kid get in touch with them, please. They say, hey, I'm looking for so-and-so. If you see them, can you have them give me a call? As another question that people wanted to, Hayden's also answering in the chat directly, that question. About preparing for the fall of 2020. We're wondering if people have been having questions about housing plans in the fall and how you're handling that whole area of supports that are needed.
This is Maura Lee. Really, what's going to have to happen, and unfortunately, we're in the gray period where colleges have not made the full decision about what campus life will look like in the fall. But if folks are considering having their students live on campus, if they've already completed housing paperwork, they should reach out and figure out what options will be available, find out if cancellations are going to be available, or discover if they're not going to issue housing contracts until the decision is made about whether the campus will be in full swing come fall.
Yeah, well, thank you for chiming in about that. So we had a lot of really good ideas today, a lot of information from our presenters and from all of you. I appreciate that. Thank you for your active participation. There's just a few more things that you should know before we log off. One is that I mentioned earlier, if you didn't get notes on everything you heard today, the slides are down at the bottom of your screen in the download today's file windows. You can download all of the slides. You'll also be getting a follow-up email from us that has a blog with where we're going to capture the learnings from today. And keep an eye out for that when it comes. So you can also feel free to contact us or send or link to us or respond to the email when we send out if there's anything else, any other questions or things that you'd like to share. Our contact information is on this next slide. It's important for our work with IES to collect feedback about our efforts. So please do take a moment to fill out the feedback form that will appear in just a moment. And thank all of you for everything that you do on behalf of our students and for joining us today. And have a good afternoon.